Hey guys, tonight we travel back in time farther than your last holiday photos, farther than Caesar, farther even than the invention of pants. You're heading to ancient Egypt, where the Nile flows lazily and crocodiles nap in the reeds. The air smells like warm sand, temple incense, and something faintly medicinal. You walk past tall reeds and limestone ruins, sandals crunching softly with every step, until you see them, people in linen kilts, faces bronzed by the sun, and teeth weirdly decent. Yes, tonight we're talking about how ancient Egyptians cleaned their teeth using things like powdered ox hoof, burnt eggshells, and sometimes ingredients that sound more like a wizard's curse than a dentist's recommendation. You probably won't survive this, at least not without gagging once or twice. But don't worry, no one's coming at you with a sharpened reed or a jar of fermented donkey milk, probably. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from and what time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind is dry but not unpleasant. You're standing beside the Nile, where papyrus boats drift lazily and ibis birds pick their way through shallows. You've arrived in ancient Egypt somewhere around 1500 BCE, which is convenient timing. The pharaoh's doing well, people are building less pyramids and more villas, and hygiene is very much in style. You quickly handed a small clay pot by a woman with a tattoo of lotus petals on her wrist. Inside is a pale grayish powder. She gestures to her teeth, grinning widely, and then points at yours with a sympathetic wince. You nod. Massage received. The ancient Egyptians were some of the earliest humans to care deeply about dental hygiene. We're talking millennia before the toothbrush, before toothpaste ads, and definitely before mint flavoring. Yet they somehow came up with a fairly effective, if disgusting, system. You begin to notice it as you walk through the village. Almost everyone carries a tiny pouch of powder. People dip their fingers in, rub it on their teeth, spit discreetly behind woven screens. There are even public rinse basins where folks queue up to gargle next to strangers, kind of like a very sandy dentist's office. With goats, historians still argue whether this widespread attention to dental care came from religious purity rituals or just practical experience with food so gritty it could strip the enamel off a boulder. After all, their bread was full of sand, not metaphorically, but literally, between poorly refined flour and grinding stones made of quartz. Egyptian meals often came with a side of accidental tooth erosion. You try to chew some flatbread handed to you by a kind merchant. It crumbles nicely, smells faintly of beer, and tastes crunchy, like if biscotti and gravel had a baby. The merchant grins. He's missing three molars. You smile back, suddenly aware of every tooth in your head. A man in a blue linen robe walks past, muttering a hymn to Thoth, god of knowledge. He's got surprisingly fresh breath. You follow him toward a temple where people line up not to worship but to swish and spit. Some offer lotus flowers, others whisper prayers for clean mouths and clear consciences. This intersection of cleanliness and sacredness isn't an accident. In ancient Egypt, the body was considered a kind of temple in its own right, and breath was seen as a kind of divine exhalation. Bad breath? That's not just unpleasant, it's spiritually rude. As the sun lowers, casting long shadows across sun-baked mud walls, you're ushered into a small chamber perfumed with myrrh. A priest places his hand gently on your shoulder. First time? He asks, and you nod. He opens a drawer filled with tiny ceramic jars. We'll start you with the mild formula, he says, scooping out a grayish-brown mix. No scorpion venom or ox bile yet. You resist the urge to back away. The powder smells faintly of ash and something disturbingly bond-like. You dip a moistened finger in and begin to rub. It feels like sandpaper. A bit of eggshell crunches ominously near your gum line. Your eyes water. Don't worry, says the priest. You'll get used to it. Just wait until we add the hoof. You laugh nervously, hoping he's joking. He's not. You wake the next morning with the sun streaming through a lattice of woven reeds, ears filled with the chirping of lapwings, and a gritty aftertaste still lingering on your tongue. Your gums feel polished, possibly violated. Hard to say. You're summoned early by the same priest who welcomed you yesterday. This time, you're led beyond the temple's public rinse chambers and into the rear courtyard, where the real work begins, the sacred, slightly nauseating art of making toothpaste. Today, he says solemnly, you grind. You are now officially a toothpaste mixer, or as he dramatically puts it in Egyptian, priest of purity of the mouth. The tools are simple but effective. A stone mortar that's seen better centuries, a wooden pestle smoothed from decades, maybe centuries of use, and a cloth apron you're advised not to look too closely at. You're not alone. 3 other novices kneel around similar stations, one humming, one weeping quietly, and one chewing on a fig, as if to distract from the horror. The priest produces a dried, curved object the color of old parchment. Ox hoof, he says with reverence. Ground very fine, mixed with burnt eggshell, rock salt, and sometimes a splash of donkey milk if the patient's important. He hands it to you. It smells like regret. Grinding it is not as straightforward as you'd expect. The hoof flakes off in sharp, stubborn bits. You press the pestle down, grinding in circular motions while dust rises in feathery puffs. The smell, intensively earthy, scorched, a little like roasted leather. Every time you cough, someone blesses you with a short chant. You don't know if it's for your lungs or your spirit. Why the hoof? You ask, eyes watering. The priest nods, pleased. Keratin strengthens the teeth. The hoof is of the earth and of the beast it grounds us. It also frightens evil breath demons. He says this without blinking. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of ox hoof was truly believed to have spiritual merit or whether it was simply the most durable abrasive they had lying around. Some scholars point out that the hoof's gritty texture made it perfect for scrubbing plaque. Others think it was more symbolic, connecting the humble mouth to the power of livestock, which was central to wealth and ritual. You keep grinding. As the sun climbs higher, the priest returns with a new addition, dried mint leaves, which he crushes between his fingers and lets you smell. Finally, something pleasant. You're allowed to mix it into your paste. The aroma cuts through the hoof dust like a breeze through a butcher's tent. Now the mixing begins. A few drops of Nile water, a sprinkle of rock salt, and a tiny bit of powdered charcoal are added to your bowl. You stir slowly, the mixture becoming a dark gray paste with the consistency of wet sand. You're told this formula is for higher-ranking scribes and minor nobility people who can afford a little luxury in their oral care. For the average farmer, a much simpler mix. Just rock salt and hoof dust, maybe with a splash of wine if it's a feast day. Nearby, a woman in her 40s, though she looks 70, laughs and tells you a story about how her grandfather once used crushed turquoise in his paste, believing it would bring him closer to Hathor, the goddess of beauty. It didn't, she says. It just turned his gums blue. Still, you can't help but admire the dedication. Every aspect of this practice, even the ridiculous parts, carries the weight of centuries. You're not just making toothpaste, you're preserving health, spirit, and appearance in a society that placed enormous value on all 3. The priest returns for inspection. He lifts a dab of your paste with a thin stick, sniffs, and gives a small grunt of approval. Tomorrow, he says, you'll add the eggshell. You nod, suppressing a sigh. Later that evening, after you've rinsed your hands in fragrant lotus water and managed to sneak away with a honey-soaked fig, you sit on a low bench and reflect on the day. You smell like barnyard incense. Your fingers are sore, but your teeth do feel oddly clean. You watch a pair of teenagers in the corner pass a jar of your ox hoof mixture, giggling as they take turns dabbing and spitting into a bowl. One of them pretends to swoon from the purity, dramatically clutching his chest. Even 3,000 years ago, teenagers were dramatic about hygiene. You laugh softly. Tomorrow's eggshell can wait. The next day begins with a rooster that doesn't so much crow as scream. You're already awake, however, thanks to the sound of pestles grinding in sync like ancient dental metronomes. Today, it's time for the next step in your training, burnt eggshell. You're greeted again by the priest, who seems far too chipper for someone holding a basket of charred, crumbling eggs. Duck eggs today, he says, showing you one with soot still smudged on the outside. Richer in calcium, good for molar dreams. He sets the basket down beside your mortar. You notice the shells come in varying shades: white, ivory, even the occasional pale green, all of them blackened to the point of flaking apart when you so much as look at them sideways. Be gentle, the priest advises. Too coarse, and you'll cut the gums. Too fine, and it'll vanish in the paste. You start crushing them between two flat stones, delicate, whispery flakes that break with satisfying pops. The smell is faintly sulfuric, like a haunted breakfast. You glance around to see if anyone else minds. No one does. In fact, one of the younger initiates is humming while blowing powdered eggshell off his fingertips like snow. Historians still debate how much the burnt eggshell contributed to dental health. The calcium content would theoretically strengthen enamel, but others argue that the abrasive quality did more harm than good, especially when combined with coarse bread and a lifetime of grit-filled flour. There's also speculation about its symbolic use: burnt egg representing rebirth, transformation, or perhaps just what was left over after breakfast. You are interrupted by a woman in a beaded headdress who plops down next to you with a yawn. Add a pinch of natron if they've got fish breath, she offers helpfully. Natronta, naturally occurring mix of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate, found in Egyptian deserts, was used for everything from body preservation to toothpaste. You've already seen it in action when they wipe down a corpse's mouth during a purification rite. Now it's apparently a mouthwash ingredient, multi-purpose stuff. You ask if she's a dentist. She scoffs. No, I'm a perfume blender, but bad breath ruins everything. Fair enough. The day's goal is to prepare a balanced paste. Oxhoof for abrasion, eggshell for strengthening, rock salt for cleansing, and now natron for deodorizing. The priest nods approvingly as you slowly swirl the mixture into a grayish-beige sludge, adding just enough Nile water to make it spreadable. He lets you test it on yourself. You brace. The sensation is aggressive, like rubbing gritty oatmeal on your teeth with a bit of a sting near the gums. But after you rinse, your mouth feels oddly fresh, like you just chewed on a warm stone and liked it. One of the other novices starts laughing as he gags on his own sample. It's not the taste, he sputters. It's the philosophy. The priest chuckles. Clean mouth, clean soul. Midway through the afternoon, you're pulled aside to help with something different, mixing a ceremonial version of the dental powder for use in the House of Life, the temple's healing complex. This blend gets saffron, honey, and a touch of frankincense, ingredients far too expensive for your average farmer. It's to be applied to the mouths of high priests during certain rituals, often while chanting to Sekhmet, goddess of both healing and destruction. Apparently no one wants to anger Sekhmet with bad breath. You wonder briefly if modern dentists would do better if they had a war goddess breathing down their necks. Maybe more flossing would happen. As evening falls, you notice something else: the social element of dental care. Friends casually share small jars of paste, trading tips like medieval influencers. Use basil if you're seeing someone, one whispers. Fennel if they're married. Nearby, an elderly man talks fondly about how he used to impress women by owning real cinnamon in his toothpaste. It burned, he says, eyes twinkling. But I had 3 wives. The priest wraps up the day with a brief prayer to Ma'at, goddess of truth and balance. He sprinkles some of your paste on a reed mat and lets it dry under the fading sun. Let your words be pure, he says, and your breath not scare the ibis. That night, before sleep, you find a small clay mirror and take a peek at your teeth. They look, okay, whiter than yesterday, definitely less fuzzy. You grin at yourself, then gag slightly as a bit of ox hoof dislodges from your molar. Still, progress. You wake up groggy and feeling like your jaws run a marathon. Your teeth don't hurt exactly, but they do feel like they've been very thoroughly exfoliated. Today, you're told, will be a lesson in tools of the trade end. No, not toothbrushes, because the Egyptians hadn't invented them quite like we know them. Instead, you're introduced to something humbler, a chewing stick. The priest hands you a thin, frayed twig and watches your expression closely. You stare at it. It stares back. Licorice root, he explains, for flavor and breath, and because it's bendy. You chew on the end tentatively, and to your surprise, it's not bad, slightly sweet, a little bitter, almost like someone boiled a tea bag and forgot to tell it to be exciting. Within minutes, the fibers soften and separate into a bristly fan. It's primitive, but undeniably effective. You've just made your own toothbrush. Historians still debate which types of wood were most commonly used. Acacia, palm, olive each has its scholarly fans. What we do know is that Egyptians were way ahead of the curve when it came to oral hygiene. While Europeans were still letting plaque run wild centuries later, the folks along the Nile were methodically scraping, rinsing, and powdering their teeth like dental monks. You're taught how to combine the chewing stick with your toothpaste to dab a bit of paste on a slate tile, dip the frayed end of the stick, and brush gently in circles. A full cleaning takes a good 5 minutes and leaves your mouth tasting like smoky licorice soup. Then comes the water rinsino swishing here. You're expected to pour it slowly from a decorated jar while humming a prayer. The rhythm matters. The sound carries the cleansing energy, or so you're told. It's about this time that another initiate pulls you aside with a grin and shows you his secret tool, a bronze toothpick with a tiny fish carved into the handle. For after meals, he says, and for impressing guests. Toothpicks, it turns out, are everywhere in ancient Egypt. They're carved from bone, shaped from metal, even braided from palm fibers. High status individuals carry theirs tucked behind the ear like a scribe's pen, and you catch more than one young novice nervously picking during lessons. There's even a little etiquette around it. You're never supposed to pick your teeth in the temple courtyard. That's where the gods walk. Always use your left hand for picking. Right is for sacred gestures. And never borrow someone else's toothpick unless you want to marry them or start a blood feud. You laugh, but you're also a little disturbed by how seriously people take their floss-adjacent habits. Dental pride here is real. Later that afternoon, you're invited to a communal rinsing ceremony led by one of the elder priestesses. Everyone lines up along a shallow limestone basin filled with warm, slightly herbal water. One by one, you lean over, rinse, and spit 3 times exactly, then dry your face with a cloth dipped in lotus oil. There's a strange beauty to it. The sun glints off the water. The courtyard echoes with low, sleepy chanting. Everyone's breath smells faintly of mint, fennel, and ambition. As the day winds down, you're given one final tool, a small linen pouch containing a chunk of natron, a short twig, and a smooth river pebble. For travel, the priest says, you never know when you'll need to freshen up mid-journey or fight off demons. You're about to laugh, but then remember a tale the priest told earlier about a merchant who was haunted by a spirit because his breath offended a tomb guardian. Maybe that's just what halitosis felt like back then. You chew a bit of licorice root before bed, using your new stick to scrape gently along the back molars. You're getting the hang of it. Now wangle the stick, twist the wrist, hum something vaguely mystical. You even begin to enjoy the routine. There's a meditative rhythm to it. And as you lie down on your reed mat, teeth cleaner than they've ever been, you realize you've gone 3 full days without touching anything resembling modern dental floss, and somehow your mouth has never felt more ceremoniously scrubbed. You drift off wondering if you'll dream of toothpicks or chewing sticks tonight, hopefully neither. The temple kitchen is buzzing this morning, which is usually a sign that something festive or deeply peculiar is underway. You arrive to find not food, but flavors being prepared for toothpaste. Yes, today's lesson is all about scent and spice because even in the blistering sun, even when your dental powder contains literal hoof, Egyptians insisted their mouths smelled pleasant. Welcome to the perfumery of the palate. The priest says dramatically as he gestures to a row of small clay jars lined up like sleepy soldiers. You peer inside one, crushed cinnamon bark, the next cardamom, then myrrh resin, dried peppermint leaves, and even a rare one blue lotus petal dust. Only for festivals, a girl whispers beside you. You get to work experimenting. A little cinnamon in your ox hoof blend gives it a warming kick, not quite cinnamon toast, more like licking a very polite incense stick. Peppermint is sharper, clearing your sinuses and making your tongue tingle. When you add honey, things take a turn. The paste turns sticky, golden brown, and almost appealing. Almost. Historians still argue whether these flavorings were primarily for hygiene, for ritual, or simply for vanity. Some ancient texts describe sweet breathed lovers whispering lotus scented promises, while others mention mouth powders as offerings during temple rites. It's a little hard to imagine someone whispering sweet nothings through powdered hoof and salt, but hey, you're adjusting. One of the more seasoned initiates shares his personal recipe: crushed frankincense, 2 drops of date syrup, and a pinch of anise. Keeps the teeth happy and the cats away, he says, completely serious. You have no idea if that's a proverb or a very specific personal problem. You're also introduced to an old superstition, breath of Seth, a term for chronic bad breath believed to be caused by the chaos god himself. To drive him away, you're told to chew clove and recite a protective charm while facing east. You try it, you chew, you chant. You mostly just get clove fragments stuck in your molars. The temple's healer passes by and chuckles. If Seth's still in your mouth, offer him coriander, she jokes. He hates coriander. As you work, you notice another dynamic at play: status. Not all ingredients are accessible to everyone. Cinnamon, saffron, and myrrh are imported and expensive, found mostly in the kits of nobles or temple elites. Your average goat herder, he's sticking to natron and mint, if he's lucky. Still, you're told that scent mattered even for the lower classes. You hear a story about a fisherman who always rubbed his gums with lavender before setting off for market, convinced it helped him sell more eels. People buy from nice-smelling mouths, he allegedly said, not from swamp breath. By midday, the sun is high, and your mouth is thoroughly assaulted by at least 7 different herbs. You're invited to a tasting circle, which is a lot like a wine tasting, but with powders and spitting bowls. Everyone dabs a bit of their blend onto their tongue, swirls, and critiques. Mmm, too much resin. Is that cumin? You brave soul. This one's got a clean finish, but is that dried onion? It's absurd and kind of delightful. You begin to understand that this isn't just about hygiene, it's a whole culture of oral aesthetics carefully honed over centuries. There's also a dash of magic mixed in. Some believe that certain spices protect not just your teeth, but your words. Sweet breath equals sweet speech. Foul breath invites foul thoughts. One papyrus suggests that even pharaohs avoided major decisions if their advisors hadn't recently rinsed. You can't trust a man whose mouth smells like rot, says the priest, deadpan. You're given a small ceramic pot to mix your own final blend. You take your time, a base of ox hoof and natron, a bit of peppermint for kick, and because you're feeling fancy, a few grains of ground saffron, just enough to turn the paste a dreamy yellow-orange. You name it, sunmouth. No one laughs. Someone even asks for a sample. As the day winds down, your breath smells like a spice bazaar, and your head is pleasantly swimming with clove fog. You chew on a fennel seed as you walk to your sleeping mat and realize that despite all your skepticism, you've started looking forward to brushing. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you start to wonder, what did Cleopatra's breath smell like?
You awaken before sunrise to the sound of distant flutes and a slightly less distant donkey coughing like it's trying to audition for a tragedy. Your gums still tingle faintly from last night's cinnamon paste, but there's no time to ponder. Today is all about rituals because in ancient Egypt, oral hygiene wasn't just cleanliness, it was sacred. As you shuffle toward the inner courtyard, you notice the novices in white linen forming a neat line beside a stone basin. They're not just rinsing, they're purifying. Before entering the temple's inner sanctum, every acolyte must cleanse the mouth as part of spiritual preparation. A dirty mouth doesn't just offend priests, it offends the gods. The water is infused with herbs today, basil, mint, and something bitter you can't quite name. You're handed a smooth black stone to press against your jaw, an ancient trick to cool the breath. Historians still debate whether this was symbolic or medicinal. You're mostly just relieved it's not hot. You're led into a quiet chamber where a high priestess begins the recitation of the breath offering. The incantation is soft and rhythmic, designed to lull both spirit and body into calm focus. Let the breath be as lotus wind, she murmurs, waving a bundle of sweetgrass near your face. You try not to sneeze. Then comes the sacred powder. Unlike the everyday grit of hoof and ash, this one is lighter, finer, and smells like chamomile and, surprise, more myrrh. It's applied with a feather brush. You stand there awkwardly as the priestess dusts your lips, your gums, your tongue. It's strangely soothing, like a spa treatment if spas were run by people who worshipped falcons. The idea, you're told, is not just to clean, but to prepare the mouth as a vessel for sacred speech. Whether reciting hymns or reading scrolls aloud, a purified mouth keeps the divine energy flowing. A stinky mouth that draws crocodile spirits and not the friendly kind. You learn that some temples even had mouth openers, designated priests who performed literal mouth rituals on statues and the deceased, often using special tools carved from gold or electrum. The mouth had to be opened and purified before the spirit could speak in the afterlife. It's not clear whether these same tools were ever used on the living, but you quietly hope not. Mid-morning, the rituals take a more personal turn. You're invited to write your own incantation, something to guard your mouth from both spiritual and social disaster. One initiate proudly presents hers. May I speak with clarity, charm, and never onion breath. You write something about not offending any more tomb spirits. You're only half joking. After a short nap, yes, temple life includes scheduled napping. You wake to soft drums and a curious ceremony underway in the courtyard. A mouth blessing for the scribes. Apparently, before copying sacred texts, scribes had their mouths gently tapped with a rod carved from sycamore wood, an echo of the earlier mouth opening tradition. It symbolizes clarity, truth, and not drooling on the scrolls. You're invited to try it. The tap feels odd, but oddly grounding, like someone reminding you, gently, not to say dumb things today. A visiting elder shares a fringed tale about a pharaoh who kept a whisper bowl, a golden dish into which he would speak private confessions. The bowl was scrubbed daily with scented powder and placed in the sun so no ill-spirited breath could linger. Historians doubt it, the elder says, but it makes a good story at feasts. You smile and you realize that here, dental hygiene is never just about teeth. It's about intention, speech, spirit, and yes, even politics. It's rumored that court advisors would deliberately freshen their mouths before meetings just to seem more trustworthy. Clean teeth, clean conscience, someone mutters. As the day fades, you return to the basin one last time. The water's still warm, you dip your hands, rinse, and hum the same incantation from earlier. Lotus wind. Your breath smells faintly of cedar and sacred herbs. You crawl into your sleeping mat, feather brush in hand, and think. You haven't just learned to brush your teeth, you've learned to bless your breath. Mandy, you've developed a routine. Wake up, chew stick, rinse, blend a little powder like a sorcerer with an overactive sense of gum care. But today, the tone shifts. You're summoned not to the temple, but to a physician's hut on the edge of the village. It's time to learn what happens when the rituals don't work, because in ancient Egypt, when toothache struck, things got resourceful. You arrive to find the healer hunched over a low table, grinding something into a dark, crumbly mess. "Tooth salve," he mutters, "for the chief guard." Says he can't chew anything harder than a fig. He gestures to a mortar filled with ground beans, onions, and wait, is that? Yes, definitely moldy bread. The healer notices your face and shrugs. Penicillium mold, not just rot medicine. Historians still argue whether this use of mold was intentional or accidental, but it's clear that Egyptians used fermented bread poultices on infected teeth and abscesses. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes it just made you smell like a bakery with anger issues. You're given the task of mashing garlic and honey, two of the era's most trusted antiseptics, into a sticky paste. Then comes the application. A small reed tube is used to blow the mixture gently into the afflicted person's mouth. You assist the healer in doing exactly this, trying not to inhale too deeply. The patient groans but gives a thumbs up. Better than leeches, he rasps. You nod like you understand, but you pray no one brings out the leeches. Later, the healer explains that bad teeth weren't just a nuisance, they were omens. A rotting molar might be seen as a curse, especially if the sufferer had recently angered a priest or skipped a ritual. There were even amulets shaped like tiny molars to ward off decay. You're handed one. It's carved from soapstone and oddly cute. There's also a more aggressive treatment, drilling. Not with modern tools, of course, but ancient evidence shows signs of rudimentary dental procedures, abscess drainage, lancing, even scraping decay with sharpened copper instruments. One clay tablet describes a healer who extracted the black worm of pain from a man's jaw. Scholars think that's a poetic way of describing pus, but still, you're suddenly very grateful for your clean teeth. You set in on a treatment. A woman with swollen gums lies still as the healer uses a heated bronze wire to cauterize a lesion. The smell is awful. She doesn't scream, just winces, squeezes your hand, and breathes through her nose like a seasoned warrior. You give her a peppermint leaf afterward, which feels woefully insufficient. That night, back in the novice quarters, the others are gossiping about the tooth demon again. Supposedly, if you skip your nightly brushing, it crawls into your mouth while you sleep and steals the strength of your words. You joke about it, but still, you brush a little longer tonight, just in case. You also notice one of the older novices soaking her toothbrush, twig and vinegar. Kills the invisible rot. She says, you try it, it's awful, but it does make your mouth feel aggressively clean, like licking a tiny pickled broom. By now, you've begun to see dental care not as a vanity project, but as a fight for survival. Infection could spread, jawbones could weaken, even speech could be impaired. And in a culture where speaking properly was tied to ritual law and leadership, a bad mouth wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. Just before bed, the healer stops by to drop off a small linen pouch. Inside is a nugget of dried pomegranate peel, another ancient remedy for gum health, and a slip of papyrus with a protective verse. May your teeth stay sharp as arrows. May your breath carry no lies. May your words be strong as stone. You chew the pomegranate slowly, savoring its sore bite, and lay back on your mat, comforted by the strange wisdom of ancient medicine. In this world, even pain had poetry. This morning, you're sent to the marketplace, a lively, bustling patchwork of colors, smells, and sounds, where tooth care takes a back seat to haggling over onions and carefully avoiding wandering animals. But you're not here for figs or fish. You're here for toothbrushes. You're here for toothbrushes. You're here for toothbrushes. Because while powdered ox hoof gets a lot of attention, the Egyptians had another everyday tool in the gentle battle against plaque. Chew sticks. You make your way toward a stall marked by bundles of thin, twiggy stalks tied with papyrus ribbon. The vendor, a sun-weathered man with a friendly smile and a few missing teeth, greets you warmly. These teeth belong to years of good care, he says with a wink. All thanks to these sticks. He holds up a bundle like a wizard showing off his magic wands. These aren't just any twigs. There from the Salvador persica tree, known today as the toothbrush tree. The Egyptians would chew one end until it softened into bristles, then use that to gently clean their teeth. You try it, it tastes a little woody, mildly bitter, and feels surprisingly refreshing. Almost like a natural mouth cleanser you're allowed to chew on. The vendor hands you a bundle. Chew in a circle. He advises seriously, or your breath might play tricks. You nod, pretending this makes perfect sense. Historians still wonder how common these tools really were. Some believe almost everyone used chew sticks. Even the Hyri one used chew sticks. Others suggest they were more popular among scribes, priests, and merchants who spent lots of time close to others. One clay figurine even shows a nobleman with what might be a toothbrush tucked neatly in his sash. You imagine a royal fashion trend, the pharaohs. Bristle coming soon to Sand and Scepter magazine. You spend the rest of the morning watching the market's quirky dental customs. A boy selling fish offers licorice root to freshen breath. An elderly woman steams sage leaves for a mild mouth rinse. A merchant displays small pockets of charcoal powder, promising to make your teeth shine like the moon over the Nile. You don't see any proof, but you do watch a curious cat sniff and then bat at the pockets. The most colorful vendor sells tiny tooth-shaped charms, little ivory, or faience amulets shaped like molars, crocodile jaws, or even miniature toothbrushes. For strong teeth, he explains, and a confident smile. You smile back and pick one shaped like a lotus flower, with delicate teeth etched on the petals. Who says dental care can't be a little beautiful? As the sun climbs higher, you find a quiet, shady alley to take a break. You practice brushing with your chew stick, gently cleaning molars, fronts, and even those tricky spots behind your lower teeth. An old scribe passing by shares a tip. Count to 70 while chewing. That's how you know you've done it right. You give it a try. 70 slow, deliberate chews. By 30, your mouth fills with the earthy bitterness of tree sap. By 50, it starts to feel clean, not minty, but fresh and calm. Ancient mouth mindfulness. That evening back at the temple, the other novices compare their chew sticks like children swapping keepsakes. One shows off hers soaked in clove oil. Another carved her initials into the handle. You spot one shaped like a tiny crocodile, either a lucky charm or a playful reminder to keep your teeth sharp. Someone asks the teacher why chew sticks aren't used in rituals. She explains that powdered mixtures are considered more sacred, their preparation symbolic, their scent easier to weave into ceremony. Sticks are for everyday care, she says softly. Powder is for the gods, you understand, as you curl up on your mat, gently nibbling the soft end of your chew stick and watching the stars blink awake over the courtyard. You think sometimes the simplest tools become the most trusted friends, and this little twig, it's definitely yours now. The morning air carries a faint scent of roasted grains and distant incense as you find yourself wandering toward the pottery workshop. Today's lesson isn't just about tooth care, it's about the containers that held the magical powders and pastes, and what those vessels reveal about daily Egyptian life. In the cool shade, potters shape clay into small jars and bowls, each one destined to cradle a unique blend of tooth cleaning ingredients. Some are simple, smooth, and unglazed, meant for everyday use. Others are intricately painted with lotus flowers and falcons, reserved for the wealthy or the priestly class. You watch a craftsman carve hieroglyphs that translate to fresh breath and health. It's easy to overlook these humble vessels, but they're crucial. Without them, powdered ox hoof and myrrh wouldn't last beyond a day in the desert heat. As the jars had tight lids and were often lined with resin to keep out moisture, preserving the sacred mixtures inside, you're handed a small alabaster jar, cold and heavy in your palm. It's not just a container, it's a symbol of status and care. Owning such a jar meant you took your dental rituals seriously, or at least wanted others to think you did. Historians still debate how widespread such luxury items were. Some argue that common folk improvised with simple baskets or wooden boxes, while others believe the art of storage was nearly as important as the powder itself. Nearby, a woman discusses her experiments with scented powders, blends of crushed rose petals, frankincense, and a pinch of salt. She insists these combinations help balance the breath and soothe the tongue. You taste a tiny dab, floral, salty, oddly calming. You learn that certain jars were dedicated solely to nighttime powders, infused with relaxing herbs like lavender and blue lotus, intended to lull the user into sleep while their mouth remained fresh. Imagine a 3,000-year-old bedtime routine that's basically the original sleepy time tea, but for your gums. There's also evidence of small spoons and scoops, delicate tools used to measure the perfect amount of powder. The scoops themselves were often carved from ivory or bone, beautifully shaped like tiny birds or fish. You wonder if anyone ever got distracted by the artistry and spilled their precious powder. As the sun climbs higher, a potter tells a curious tale of a jar found in a tomb filled with a strange black powder thought to be an early toothpaste. When analyzed, it contained crushed charcoal and crushed seashells, abrasive but surprisingly effective. You imagine an ancient version of today's charcoal toothpaste trend, but without the fancy marketing. You run your fingers over the jar's smooth surface and consider how much care went into these tiny everyday objects. They're reminders that even in a civilization obsessed with the divine and eternal, the small practical details matter deeply. Later, as you return to your quarters, you carefully place your borrowed jar next to your chew sticks and powders. Each object tells a story, not just about teeth, but about how people lived, cared, and connected with the world around them. And for once, you're glad the story includes something as simple and oddly comforting as a jar. You wake to the low murmur of temple bells and the faint clatter of sandals on stone. Today, your duties take you away from the safety of the temple walls and into the sun-drenched fields beyond, specifically to a papyrus reed marsh along the Nile, not for writing, not for scrolls, for mouthwash. The journey there is long and hot, the sand sticking to your ankles like clingy children, but your guide, an older temple herbalist, seems energized by the task. She cheerfully explains that many of the most refreshing oral rinses in Egypt weren't Made in perfumed urban workshops, but in places like this, muggy fragrant, teeming with reeds, herbs, and secrets. She hands you a bundle of ingredients: mint, fennel seeds, anise, dried iris petals, and a suspiciously sticky lump of tree resin. This, she declares, will make a rinse strong enough to convince a crocodile you've brushed. Back at her hut near the water, she grinds the ingredients using a sandstone mortar, then boils them with river water in a ceramic pot. The scent is spicy, sweet, and medicinal, like something between black licorice and temple incense. Once cooled, the resulting liquid is strained through fine cloth and poured into a blue glazed jug with a narrow neck. You try it. It burns, but then it refreshes. Getting paint like out on sev unprepared as a Paris of kerosene. In tiki billy is bargain. Your mouth tingles, your breath smells like a garden that just got sassed, and your tongue feels as though it's had a good talking, too. Historians still argue whether these herbal rinses were used daily or saved for rituals and high-status events. Some tomb paintings show servants offering jugs to their masters, while others hint that rinsing might be part of mourning, purification routines, especially among priests. And here's the twist: some rinses doubled as mouth perfumes, designed less for health and more for flirtation. The herbalist winks as she describes a particular formula used by dancers in the royal court: myrrh, cinnamon, rosewater, and a few drops of fermented fig wine. One swish, and even a scarab will blush. You practice your own rinse making, though your measurements are generous. The result is spicy and floral, but the herbalist politely calls it ambitious. You spit it into the reeds and nearby frog fleas. Fair. You also learn that some Egyptian rinses included a touch of natron, a naturally occurring salt used in mummification and cleaning. When used sparingly, it added a mineral tang and antiseptic quality. Used too liberally, it turned your mouth into the desert itself. You test a drop, your teeth feel clean, but your gums beg for mercy. As the day draws on, you help the herbalist harvest more ingredients: mint from the garden plot, licorice root dug up from sandy soil, and small blossoms of chamomile. She tells stories as she works, of a noblewoman who refused to speak without rinsing first, of a fisherman who claimed mint rinses helped him speak to the river. Back at the temple, you present your rinse to the teacher, who sniffs it, swishes it, and nods slowly. You didn't burn the herbs. That's a good start. High praise in this world. That night, as you prepare for sleep, you rinse one last time: mint and rose water, just a drop of natron, and a prayer for tomorrow's breath. You lie down with your teeth singing quietly to themselves, your gums tingling with gratitude, and your breath sweet enough to make a papyrus scroll curl in admiration. Who knew a swamp could teach you so much about elegance? The temple is unusually quiet this morning. No clatter of basins, no urgent chanting, just a gentle breeze that rustles the linen canopies like someone whispering secrets through woven threads. You rise slowly, stretch the stiffness from your limbs, and realize today's lesson is more spiritual than scientific. You're joining a ritual purification ceremony, and yes, dental hygiene is very much part of it. In ancient Egypt, physical cleanliness was deeply connected to spiritual purity. Priests didn't just wash their hands and feet, they purified their mouths too, often several times a day. Because when you're reciting prayers to gods with crocodile heads and star-strewn hair, bad breath is just not acceptable. You're led to a side chamber of the temple where a wide alabaster bowl sits, filled with cool, fragrant water steeped in blue lotus, mint, and crushed acacia pods. A priest explains that this water isn't for drinking, it's for mouth rinsing and symbolic cleansing. Your breath, he says with a calm smile, must not offend Mott. You're handed a small ladle and told to swish in silence. The water tastes faintly floral, with a bitterness that feels ceremonial, like the flavor equivalent of bowing your head. This isn't just about hygiene, it's about words. In Egyptian belief, speech carried divine power. Every prayer, every chant, every whispered spell needed to be uttered with a clean tongue and untainted breath. Otherwise, it was like scribbling sacred text in the sand with a fish bone. You watch as the senior priest dips strips of linen into the bowl, then gently pat their lips. One murmurs a line you barely catch: "Let my mouth be open like the mouths of the blessed." You later learn it's part of the opening of the mouth ceremony, usually for statues or the dead, but today adapted for the living. Historians still debate whether these purification practices were limited to temples or extended into noble households. Some suggest that aristocratic children were taught similar rituals, blending piety with oral health from a young age. Others think it was mostly a priestly obsession. Yet another reason commoners viewed temple life as both glamorous and exhausting. You're instructed to perform a slow, deliberate brushing with sacred powder, ox hoof, frankincense, and dried Lava stammen. Each stroke must be accompanied by a breath prayer. It's awkward at first, like trying to floss during a meditation class, but soon the rhythm takes over. Brush, inhale, exhale. Cleanse, chant, cleanse again. An older priest notices your effort and leans in with a mischievous whisper. I once brushed so vigorously during a festival, I lost a tooth and claimed it was a sign from Thoth. You try not to laugh with a mouth full of powder. Later, you help prepare the ritual, scent diffusers, that's of the small clay cones filled with fragrant paste placed near the altar. Some contain kefir, the holy mixture of wine, honey, raisins, and resin. When warmed, it releases a comforting dreamlike aroma that masks not only unwashed armpits but also the occasional hint of stale breath. You wonder how many sacred ceremonies were saved by good incense. Before the day ends, you're shown one more practice, the use of magical mouth amulets. These aren't for brushing or rinsing, they're worn or tucked under pillows to protect the breath of the sleeper. One is shaped like a tiny open mouth. Another, like a baboon, face a nod to Thoth, god of wisdom, and apparently dental accountability. You lie down that night with one of these amulets near your mat. Your mouth has been scrubbed, rinsed, blessed, and kissed by lotus-flavored vapor. You breathe deeply and wonder if the gods will notice, and if they don't, well, at least your breath won't be the reason. You're woken before dawn by the low grumble of carts and the rhythmic clop of donkeys' hooves. Today's lesson takes you outside the temple again, this time to the marketplace, where powdered ox hoof and mint leaves aren't just sacred ingredients, they're commodities. The sun hasn't even broken the horizon, but vendors are already shouting gently at each other. Egyptian style shouting, which is more like polite singing with a slightly judgmental tone. You trail behind your herbalist guide, eyes adjusting to the chaos. Woven baskets of dried herbs, pots of sticky resin, bundles of cinnamon bark, and yes, sacks of crushed hoof. She tells you to keep your pouch tied tightly. Powdered ox hoof is expensive, and theft is common. One vendor mutters that his last batch disappeared overnight, possibly taken by a jealous wife or a very thorough priest. You linger at a stall where a young boy offers samples of a popular blend, hoof, myrrh, fennel, and pounded oyster shell. He claims it was used by a princess personal grinder. The mix tastes earthy and sharp with a chalky crunch. The boy winks and adds, it also keeps your teeth white enough to shame the moon. While you taste, your guide haggles for ingredients. The bartering is a performance, exaggerated groans, dramatic gasps, and the eternal complaint that this used to cost a quarter jar less during Pharaoh Jedkar's reign. You suspect it never did. Historians still argue whether these markets were where most Egyptians sourced their hygiene products. Some believe most families made their own mixtures at home. Others argue that regional markets, especially near temples, served as the central hub for medicinal and dental supplies, especially for those who could afford the convenience. You try to imagine a farmer chewing on a licorice root while trading barley. It's oddly comforting. One woman offers something strange, a paste made with honey acacia and powdered date pit. It's smeared on the gums and left to sit, supposedly warding off both toothaches and snakes of the mouth. A poetic way of describing bad breath. You try a little. It's sticky. It's sweet. You feel vaguely cursed and vaguely kissed. Another stall sells small perfumed cloths, early breath fresheners, pressed with rose oil and mint folded neatly into tiny triangles. The vendor offers one free with every purchase of 2 jars of powdered hoof. You buy one just for the smell. It makes your linen satchel smell like a bouquet that once flirted with a bonfire. You pause by a scribe's stand where a half-finished scroll lists common dental remedies. There's a recipe for mouth rot involving mashed radish, barley water, and salt. Your guide reads it and mutters, or just chew parsley. Toward midday, the market swells with priests, midwives, soldiers, and farmers, all mingling over spice pyramids and scroll scraps. One man claims to have invented a blend that puts fire in the teeth, a combination of powdered juniper and mustard seed. You try it, you regret it. You also spot a few clever branding tactics. Jars with painted eyes and grinning faces, scrolls boasting endorsed by Temple of Sekhmet, and even a catchy slogan, your teeth as the gods intended them. You chuckle. Ancient marketing is alive and well. Before heading back, you watch a group of children crushing mint between stones, laughing as they take turns pretending to be priests. One solemnly raises a stick and announces, "Let this chew bring honor to Ra." Everyone bursts into giggles. That night, as you unpack your satchel, now heavy with powders, pastes, and questionable clove oil, you reflect on how even the busiest, loudest corners of Egyptian life revolved around tiny rituals, and how sometimes the most sacred routines began with a bargain and a smile. You're still rubbing sleep from your eyes when the temple senior physician calls you over with an oddly shaped jar in his hand. It smells pungent, not awful, not pleasant, somewhere between fermented dates and an open air fish market at noon. Today, he announces with far too much cheer, we're going to learn about tooth pain, and just like that, the comfort of fragrant mouth rinses is over. Welcome to ancient Egyptian dentistry, the land of clove, spiced optimism, and goat fat despair. You sit on a woven mat as the physician unrolls a reed paper scroll filled with mouth diagrams. Well, more like vague ovals with angry scribbles. He taps at one with a reed pen. This is the molar of a nobleman. He had a date pit stuck in it for 6 days. We removed it using copper tweezers, a prayer to Thoth, and no small amount of screaming. You're not sure whether to be impressed or terrified. Historians still debate just how advanced Egyptian dental care truly was. Some argue that their remedies were more symbolic than surgical, focused on soothing the symptoms rather than treating the root causes. Others point to evidence of drilled teeth and filled cavities, insisting there was a surprising level of precision. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere between brilliance and bandages. You're shown a drawer filled with dental instruments slender, copper picks, flattened spatulas, a clamp that resembles a horrifying nutcracker, and tiny spoons that were used to pack remedies into cavities. This one, the physician says, we used to press honey into the gum line. Bees don't judge. You watch as a young patient is brought in. His jaw swollen, his eyes glassy with discomfort, the physician examines his mouth, nods grimly, then prepares a mixture of crushed barley, natron, onion juice, and yes, ox hoof powder. It's scooped onto a linen pad and pressed to the aching gum like a poultice. You're invited to help with the next remedy, a concoction of chewed carob bark, pounded garlic, and a drop of vinegar. You mash it into a sticky mess and roll it into a tiny plug. It's supposed to cool the fire in an infected tooth. Whether it works or simply distracts the patient with its overwhelming flavor remains unclear. Toothache myths are also shared. How some believe that tiny tooth demons caused pain by gnawing inside the gums. One apprentice whispers that a single recited phrase, spoken backward at moonrise while holding a fig leaf, could evict them. You try it later, privately. No improvement, but it's a good story. Some patients swore by amulets, especially those carved with images of the god Bazay, squat, lion face protector against pain and illness. The physician wears one around his neck and strokes it fondly before pulling a tooth. It's unclear whether the amulet calms the patient or just the doctor. You witness a rare and daring treatment, the drilling of a molar using a tiny flint-tipped bow drill. The whir of the tool, the gritted teeth of the assistant holding the patient down, the beads of sweat on the healer's brow, it's all mesmerizing in a mildly terrifying way. The patient faints, the physician nods. That's normal. And yet, amid all this grim business, there are moments of gentleness. A mother soothing her son with a honey-coated fig, a scribe writing down a new remedy that worked for his cousin's throbbing second left, and the quiet look of relief when pain finally fades. You spend the rest of the day mixing herbal pastes, folding cloth strips, and massaging sore jaws with olive oil and myrrh. Your hands smell like a spice. Merchants dream your respect for ancient dentists skyrockets. That night, your teeth ache slightly, not from illness, but from empathy. You swish a cooling rinse, whisper a quick apology to your molars, and place a tiny carved hippo god beneath your pillow, just in case. You awaken to the soft clink of pottery being stacked in a high-pitched giggle. Children are already up, and from the sound of it, they're involved in something messy. Today, you're shadowing one of the women in charge of domestic health practices, and she insists on starting the morning with a visit to a wealthy household's nursery. You can learn a lot, she says, from how children spit. You follow her through shaded courtyards into a family compound where a gaggle of linen-clad children are gathered around a low table covered in little clay pots. One is poking at something that looks suspiciously like pudding, except it smells like mint and ashes. You've entered the world of household dental care, a little less sacred, a lot more chaotic. The lady of the house welcomes you with a polite nod and a slightly frazzled expression. They're due for their weekly paste scrubbing, she says, ushering you toward a sunlit alcove where a servant is grinding what appears to be ox hoof and fennel seed in a small mortar. Dare to myrrh, but they'll survive. One child starts gagging dramatically at the sight of the paste. Another snatches the mortar and pretends to feed it to a clay hippo toy. The health matron just sighs and hands you a tiny linen rag. They'll cooperate better if you sing. You hum awkwardly as you dab the thick paste onto the child's teeth. They squirm and snort with laughter, managing to both drool and complain at the same time. Somehow it's charming. Historians still debate the extent of childhood dental care in non-elite homes. Some argue that toothbrushing was only ritualized among the upper class, while others point to household records suggesting that even farmers kept basic oral tools near their hearths. Either way, it's clear the wealthy took no chances with their children's smiles. The children here are taught to chew on date pits and licorice sticks, both for entertainment and tooth polishing. One small girl proudly displays her toothbrush, a chewed palm frond tied with string and dipped in rose water. You're not sure if it's hygienic, but she seems convinced. In the kitchen, another servant prepares the family. Dental rinse for the day, boiled mint vinegar, and a touch of crushed alum. It's bitter, she admits, but it keeps the men from smelling like donkey breath. You help pour the mixture into small shell-shaped cups, and soon the family gathers for their post-meal rinse. Everyone sips, swishes, spits except one uncle, who insists on gargling dramatically while recounting how Isis herself once cleaned his teeth in a dream. The children are both horrified and enchanted. Later in the afternoon, you assist in making a fresh batch of cleansing powder. You sift fine ash from burned barley stalks, add powdered myrrh and ox hoof, and gently stir in a pinch of natron. The process feels oddly soothing, like making medicine and poetry at the same time. Once the mixture is done, it's stored in a painted jar labeled with a symbol for pleasant breath, a lotus flower beside a smiling ibis. You admire the artistry, apparently even storage jars in ancient Egypt had better dental branding than modern mouthwash bottles. The day ends in the courtyard, where the children are playing temple healer. One boy is pretending to be a priest with a powdered ox hoof grinder, while two others take turns pretending to faint from toothache. You're both amused and a little disturbed by their accuracy. You walk home beneath a fading sky, satchel now containing a tiny palm brush, a half shell of mint rinse, and a paste-stained rag that smells faintly of cloves and chaos. There's something comforting about seeing how even the most dignified rituals were once just household chores, wrangled between naps and goat herding. Tomorrow, you'll finally try making your own powder blend from scratch, but tonight you let your head sink into the mat and savor the faint mint tingle on your tongue. You wake up determined. Today is your day to make your own tooth powder from scratch, just like any mildly overconfident ancient Egyptian apprentice who's had maybe 3 good nights of sleep and one dream about talking crocodiles. You've watched, you've learned, you've chewed more fennel than is medically advisable. Time to see if you've got the grit and the grit ratio to blend something worthy of the gods, or at least your molars. Your mentor appears just as you're setting up, arms crossed, eyebrow raised. Don't burn the temple down, she says. That's all the encouragement you need. You start by assembling your ingredients on a low table near the herb wall. Dried ox hoof, well scrubbed and sun bleached, myrrh resin, mint leaves, fennel seed, powdered pumice, and a little natron for that chalky zing. You add a few sprigs of thyme just because it smells like a confident scribe. You are, for all intents and purposes, now a toothpaste DJ. The pestle and mortar are heavier than they look. Your first few grinds are uneven, sending hoof bits flying like spicy gravel, but you get the rhythm press, swirl, crush, breathe. The myrrh clumps stubbornly, so you warm it gently near an oil lamp until it softens. The mint, on the other hand, crushes like a dream, sharp green, utterly alive. You resist the urge to just eat it. Historians still argue whether these powders were standardized or improvised. Some temple recipes include precise ratios, half a palm of hoof to 1 fig's worth of mint, but in most cases, people likely made do with what they had. Your own proportions, therefore, are bold and perhaps slightly risky. You add a few drops of honey water to bind it. The resulting texture is enthusiastic. Now for the test. You wrap a linen cloth around your finger, dip it into the paste, and begin brushing. The crunch is intense, like licking a clean riverbank. There's a pleasant heat from the fennel, a bitterness from the natron, and a faintly sweet, ghostly aftertaste from the honey. It's not awful. You might even sell it. You offer some to your mentor. She raises an eyebrow, dabs her finger in, and tries it without a word. She nods once. You didn't disgrace yourself. That's practically a rave review. Encouraged, you portion your blend into tiny palm-sized pots and decorate the lids with crude lotus doodles. A few nearby scribes take interest, one suggesting a trade. A fresh scroll of poetic insults for a week's worth of paste, you agree immediately. The scroll includes such gems as you smell like Pharaoh's laundry on a swamp day. You start experimenting with variations, a soothing blend with rosewater and ash, a spicy version with coriander and onion peel, bad idea, and a cooling mint clove combo that actually makes your gums tingle. You even consider adding ground turquoise for color, but your mentor quickly vetoes this. Your mouth is not a necklace. Later, you sneak a peek at the temple's recipe archive. A dry but oddly poetic series of scrolls listing formulas like hour of breath for a worn man, hoof myrrh, thyme, and palm wine, rinse of silk, speakers, mint, reed ash, dried, lotus stem, paste of rebirth, do not swallow barley flour, natron, and 1 drop of crocodile oil. You decide against trying the last one. As the sun dips lower, you find yourself humming while bottling your latest creation. There's something deeply satisfying about this ritual, the grinding, the tasting, the tiny hope that someone might smile a little brighter and fresher because of your work. And who knows, maybe one day someone will find your dusty little pot in an ancient ruin, sniff it suspiciously, and say, "Ah, yes." It smells like a mildly talented amateur with good intentions. You clean up as twilight falls, storing your paste carefully and rinsing your cloth under a trickling fountain. The breeze smells of lotus and stone. Your teeth feel clean, your heart a little fuller. The next morning arrives with a knock at your door and a surprise request. You've been invited, well, voluntold, to help prepare offerings for a tooth cleansing ritual at a nearby shrine. It's a special day honoring Sekhmet, the lion headed goddess of healing and ferocity, which seems like a slightly alarming combination for a dental festival. Sekhmet can cure fevers and smite entire armies, your mentor whispers as you walk, so be respectful, and maybe don't mention that one time you mixed onion peel into the paste. The shrine sits beside a lotus pond, its walls painted with images of Sekhmet battling demons and casually sipping herbal teas. Inside, the air is thick with incense. Offerings of food, perfume, and bundles of herbs are already arranged, but today, there's something extra on the altar. Tiny jars of tooth powder laid in perfect rows like shimmering desert pebbles. You join a group of temple attendants preparing the final batch. Each paste is customized for its purpose. For the warrior's smile includes date vinegar and frankincense. Guesses, miss? For the child's breath has mint, honey, and crushed reed pulp. The mixtures are wrapped in linen and anointed with oil before being placed on small offering stones. Facing east, as you carefully label a pot with the symbol for restored mouth, a priest approaches, nods approvingly, and hands you a bowl. You will assist with the ritual cleansing, he says. Start with this paste. It's made with ox hoof, yes, but also a drop of lion's milk. You pause from an actual lion. The priest raises an eyebrow. It's symbolic. You smile, relieved. Historians still argue about the line between medicine and magic in Egyptian rituals like this. Some believe the pastes used in offerings were purely ceremonial, never meant for real use, while others point to records of ritual powders being repurposed by commoners, especially if they were left over from temple ceremonies. And either way, the symbolism is powerful. To cleanse the mouth is to purify the body, the breath, and even the soul. The ritual begins at midday. Incense billows, chants echo softly, and you watch as worshippers step forward one by one to dip their fingers in the sacred paste and anoint their lips or gums. Some mumble prayers, others simply breathe deeply, eyes closed. A few make exaggerated spitting noises, which may or may not be part of the official script. A child drops their jar. It shatters with a small puff of minty dust. Everyone gasps. Then the priest quickly draws a protective sigil in the air and mutters, "Sekhmet forgives accidents." The ritual resumes. You assist in handing out bundles of cleansing herbs, mostly myrrh, mint, and a curious item called lion's tongue, which turns out to be a variety of dried sage. Worshippers are instructed to chew a sprig and bury it in the earth after use to ground one as troubles. It's like ancient Egyptian therapy, but with slightly better breath. Later, you help clean the shrine, sweeping powdery remnants and extinguishing the candles. A few attendants debate whether Sekhmet prefers mint or fennel, and one quietly claims he once dreamed she personally flossed his teeth with sunbeams. No one argues. As the sky shifts toward dusk, you find yourself standing before the altar, holding your last jar. You say nothing, just close your eyes and press the jar to your chest. It smells like effort, like learning, like the world's oldest breath mint. You leave it beside a carved lion paw and walk home in silence, your fingers still tingling from the incense, your heart a little warmer. And tomorrow you'll begin learning about breath charms, the final piece in Ip's sweet-smelling dental puzzle. But for now, you sleep knowing that your humble little jar might just please a goddess. You wake to a voice at your door. Up, you're late for the breath charms. You stumble out still half, dreaming, clutching a palm leaf as if it's a toothbrush. Outside, the morning air smells like warm sand and jasmine. Today, you're visiting a retired temple scribe who, according to local rumor, once cured a merchant's halitosis using nothing but a poem and a pebble. The scribe's home is part library, part greenhouse, part chaotic bird sanctuary. He waves you in, handing you a cup of lukewarm barley tea. Starting with a charm, he says, voice low and theatrical. Repeat after me. Fresh be thy words, O breath of Ra. You murmur the phrase, and he nods. See, you're halfway cured already. You're not entirely convinced, but you follow him into a sun drenched room lined with scrolls and jars. The table in front of you is piled high with herbs, reeds, painted shells, and small amulets, each tagged with a different glyph for health or speech. You're here to learn how ancient Egyptians blended magical incantations with oral hygiene, and it's somehow even weirder and more wonderful than you hoped. He picks up a carved ivory stick. This was planted with a charm during a lunar eclipse. Still smells like fennel. Go on, sniff, you do. It smells like fennel, and maybe mystery. Historians still debate how seriously these charms were taken. Some argue they were purely symbolic, psychological aids for the nervous or devout. Others point to burial evidence, amulets clutched close to the mouth, chant fragments written inside coffins, suggesting the ancients believed these verses could truly protect one's speech in both life and afterlife. Your host shows you how to make a simple breath amulet. Grind mint with a bit of natron. Press it into a reed casing and wrap it with linen inscribed with a phrase like "Sweet be thy tongue to the gods." The result looks like a breathman's great-grandfather. He tucks one behind his ear for when I gossip and hands another to you. You spend the afternoon composing your own charm. It takes longer than expected. You try rhyming crocodile with smile, but the scribe gently suggests another direction. Eventually, you come up with "Let my voice not wilt the rose. May minty winds from me compose a speech so soft, even Ra doze." You press it into a papyrus scrap and roll it tight, slipping it into a tiny pottery pendant. It feels absurd and profound all at once. Later, you practice breath rituals, slow exhalations through reeds, humming chants while chewing myrrh pellets, and a bizarre exercise that involves whistling into a clay jar to wake up your tongue. You're not entirely sure how hygienic it is, but your breath does start to feel oddly fresher. Or maybe you've just been distracted enough to forget about it. The scribe shares tales from his youth, traveling herbalist who sold whisper wands, probably just perfumed sticks, singers who carried fennel beads in their sleeves, and a dancer who swore her breath never stank thanks to a charm stitched into her sandal strap. He leans back with a grin. We didn't just want clean teeth, we wanted charming speech, to whisper like wind through lotus petals, to kiss without curses. You nod, impressed. The Egyptians weren't just hygienic, they were poetic about it. As twilight deepens, he gifts you a tiny scroll of favorite charms. Some serious, some clearly meant to tease. One reads, "May thy breath offend no cat." You promise to recite it nightly. You walk home humming one of the chants, the tiny amulet tucked in your belt. The stars are already out, twinkling like temple lamps, and your breath puffs into the night, faintly minty, faintly magical, and tomorrow, you'll return to the temple one last time to reflect on all you've learned. But tonight, you fall asleep with a whisper on your lips and not a whiff of onion. The next morning, you're back at the temple grounds, standing quietly beneath the same sycamore tree where days ago you first tried the Hoof powder paste. It's cooler today with a breeze that rustles the papyrus fronds like someone gently flipping through an old scroll. You're not here to grind or chant or even brush. You're here to reflect on the strange, gritty, unexpectedly tender world of ancient Egyptian dental care. You head inside and nod to a familiar face. Your mentor, leaning over a bundle of dried herbs, snipping stalks of mint and fennel with a look of practiced detachment. "You made it," she says without looking up. "I half expected you to flee after the lion's milk paste." You smile, symbolic lion's milk. She snorts, still smelled like regrets. You spend the morning helping prepare the new apprentice kits. Small, linen rolls containing powdered hoof, miniature jars of natron, bits of myrrh resin, even tiny wax figurines to encourage good breath through gentle fear. You label each with a hieroglyph for cleansing, drawing the symbols slowly, remembering the days when you couldn't even tell them apart from bird doodles. One of the priests pauses beside you. "You've improved," he says. "Your paste doesn't crackle like gravel anymore." A compliment in temple terms. He tells you that, historically, Egypt's concern with oral health went deeper than most civilizations. "We honored the mouth," he says. "The place of speech, of prayer, of song. You don't speak to the gods through rotten breath." Historians still debate whether the average Egyptian was truly obsessed with oral hygiene, or if these practices were mainly reserved for priests, scribes, and wealthier citizens. Some dental remains suggest that even commoners used chewing sticks and herbal rinses. Others argue that elite rituals like the opening of the mouth ceremony, performed on mummies to restore speech in the afterlife, point to a deeply spiritual connection between the mouth and one's eternal self. You run your tongue over your teeth, thinking about this. You remember the fruity bitterness of myrrh, the cool bite of mint, the crunch of hoof grit. You remember the night you spilled a full bowl of powder and tried to sweep it up without anyone noticing. You were very bad at it. There's still a hoof smudge in the corner. A young initiate runs by, holding a jar triumphantly above his head. I made the paste without sneezing into it. He shouts. Progress later. You're tasked with archiving the Temple of Tooth Knowledge. Okay, that's not its real name, but it should be. Scrolls line the walls. Formulas, chant verses. Diagrams of teeth, symbols for sweet breath, instructions for reed-based breath strainers which sound worse than they are. You carefully dust each shelf, occasionally sneaking glances at the weirder titles, paste for the reversal of garlic breath, charm against the stinging tongue. Powder to appease a fussy wife, apply before speaking. You find yourself drawn to one crumbling scroll in particular. The title, Recipe of the Honest Smile. Inside, it reads, Hoof of ox, mint of garden, oil of joy. Use sparingly, laugh often. You copy it down and pocket the scrap. Maybe one day, someone will rediscover your own paste recipe and smile at the absurdity and effort of it all. As the sun begins to tilt west, your mentor hands you a final assignment. Craft a starter kit for a new apprentice. You wrap each item with care, a sliver of pumice, a pinch of fennel, a folded scroll with instructions, written in your clumsy but confident hand. You tuck your charm inside for luck. Before you leave, you return to the shrine of Sekhmet. It's quiet now, the offering's cleared, the incense holder's empty. You kneel and whisper, thanks for not smiting me. Then you stand and walk out into the late afternoon light, the temple doors closing gently behind you. You've learned a lot about teeth, yes, but also about patience, ritual, absurdity, and the way humans always seem to want to make the world around them a little sweeter, even if it means grinding hoof powder with a rock and hoping for the best. And tonight, you sleep with mint under your pillow. You're almost ready to return to your normal life, whatever that means now, after days steeped in powders, chants, and temple whisperings. But before you go, there's one final stop, the city's apothecary quarter, where healers, herbalists, and wannabe alchemists gather to mix remedies, argue about natron ratios, and shout at goats blocking their doors. Your mentor wants you to see how oral hygiene gets commercialized, how temple recipes seep into street stalls and homes. You've learned the sacred, she says. Now learn the sales pitch. You pass a merchant hawking a blend called Pharaoh's Freshness, proudly claiming its hoof, free, child safe, and twice blessed. Another is pushing Cleopatra's kissing dust, guaranteed to impress your lover or confuse your enemies. You duck into a shaded booth run by an elderly woman with 5 cats and twice as many teeth. Somehow, she invites you to sit and offers you a chew stick soaked in honey and vinegar. Keeps the breath sweet and the neighbors quieter, she says. You nod and chew, it's intense, like biting into a spicy pickle while reading poetry. On the shelves behind her are dozens of jars and pockets, many with familiar ingredients, mint, myrrh, natron, but some surprising ones too. Crushed lotus seeds for sweetness, papyrus ash for whitening, even tiny bits of crocodile shell for bite strength, though historians would raise a collective eyebrow. You ask about her bestseller. Without hesitation, she points to a paste called Scribe's Secret, worn between tongue and cheek during arguments, she says. Stops you from saying things you regret, you buy too. She teaches you an old market saying, if it smells like garlic, it's love. If it smells like hoof, it's business. Not entirely reassuring, but certainly memorable. Historians still argue over how widespread these folk dental cures were. Some believe most Egyptians stuck with reed brushes and basic pastes, while others point to archaeological finds of individualized cosmetic jars and even stylized tongue scratchers, suggesting that personal breath care may have been more common than assumed, especially in cities where close quarters made every exhalation a social weapon. You pass by a group of children playing priest and patient, one pretending to bless a jar of powdered ox hoof while the other groans dramatically. You smile. The next generation already steeped in hygiene and theatrics. Later, you sit beneath a fig tree with a few coins left and a dusty scroll of chant fragments in your lap. You read one softly, the breath of my lover is scented with mint, the voice of my friend like sweet river wind. Let no rot dwell where laughter has been. You hum it under your breath, wondering whether someone thousands of years from now might stumble upon that same chant. Squint at the faded ink and try it out loud just to see what it feels like. You walk back through the apothecary, stalls one last time, passing men boiling herbs in clay pots, women pressing powders into molds shaped like lotus blossoms, teenagers trying to sell magic mouth stones that are really just pebbles painted gold. It hits you then. Oral care wasn't just medicine, it was identity, it was ritual, it was romance, it was politics, prayer, and pride, all packed into a little jar beside your bed. You return to your quarters with pockets full of mint, notes full of nonsense, and a heart weirdly full. You line up the jars you've collected, hoof powder, fennel, reed polish, and place your scribbled recipe beside them. Then, as the sky deepens to violet and stars prick the edge of the Nile, you reach for your reed brush one last time. Not because you need it, but because it feels right. The final evening settles softly over the city, the warm breeze carrying distant laughter and the faint splash of river water. You sit by your window, the last rays of sun melting into the horizon like honey dripping from a comb. Your hands trace the familiar shapes of your makeshift dental kit, a small jar of powdered ox hoof, a chewed reed brush, and the tiny charm you crafted long ago. You breathe in deeply, savoring the mingled scents of mint myrrh and earth, scents that feel almost like old friends now. It's strange to think how much care went into something so small and ordinary as cleaning teeth, and yet here you are, tangled in centuries of tradition, ritual, and human curiosity. You remember the many mornings grinding hoof powder, the evenings whispering breath charms beneath the sycamore, the bustling apothecary stalls where commerce and folklore danced hand in hand, the people you've met in your mind's eye, the quirks and customs that made their routines so beautifully human. Historians still puzzle over some of the details, the precise recipes, the true efficacy of certain ingredients, the balance between magic and medicine, but you've come to understand that maybe it's not just about science or superstition, it's about the stories we tell ourselves to feel safe, clean, and connected. About the little rituals that remind us we belong somewhere, that we matter, that even the smallest act, like brushing your teeth, can be a quiet rebellion against chaos. Tonight, as you lay your head down, you let your thoughts drift gently to the ancient riverbanks, to the dusty temple chambers, to the quiet moments of self-care practiced by people long gone but not forgotten. You feel a soft peace settling in, a kind of gratitude for the messy, beautiful tapestry of history you've just lived through. So as your eyelids grow heavy and the room fills with the hush of night, remember this. You carry with you not just clean teeth, but a legacy of care, curiosity, and gentle magic. Good night, dear listeners. Sleep well. The world slows now, the colors fading softly around the edges, like the last embers of a campfire whispering their final stories into the dark. You feel the gentle rhythm of your own breath, slow and steady, carrying you deeper into calm, the dusty sense of ancient Egypt. The warm earth, sweet herbs, and distant river linger just beneath your senses, wrapping you in a quiet embrace. There's no rush here, no loud noises, no glaring lights, just the soft, soothing pulse of history unfolding in a voice meant for ease and rest. You can almost hear the rustling of papyrus leaves, the distant call of a night bird, the faint murmur of voices carried on a warm breeze as you drift. Remember that every tiny ritual, every grain of powdered hoof, every whispered charm was a way to make the world gentler, kinder, to bring order to the small important details, to claim a moment of peace amidst the swirl of life. Let your thoughts settle like soft sand, each one a tender step towards sleep. You are safe here, cradled in stories spun from the past but alive in this quiet present moment. Your breath is calm, your mind at ease. Now let go of all cares. Let the night fold around you like a soft linen shroud, cool and comforting. Drift slowly, dream sweetly, and when morning comes, carry this calm with you. Good night and sweet dreams.